was just amazed at how little conversation I heard about the issues that were going on in the communities that they were in. That's a deliberate thing. That's a deliberate thing. Very deliberate thing. So, just to kind of emphasize what he was saying, and I've seen it firsthand myself. So that's an important segment of our struggle. So we have young people who are isolated, who are not, not being, the issues are not being brought to them. They can't get in speakers that are really talking about stuff. Yeah. It's a problem.
I mean, I feel like at my school, it would definitely. I don't feel like there would be barriers to getting good, say, good, solid speakers. I've done it with an organization that had some pretty people saying some pretty radical shit. I mean, real stuff. And it just for me the hardest thing is getting people. Well, sometimes it's not, but it depends how. But sometimes it feels like the hardest thing is getting people interested because I know I've tried, but yeah, that's my.
So let me ask you this: on your campus, like this is what happened, and it can happen today. If you had any kind of, let's say, affairs, world affairs, organization, or public affairs organization, something that talk about the issues and bring it, show films and stuff, of activities, movement activity type things that are going on, I mean, have an interest group, because when I first went to college as a freshman, I joined what they call a world affairs seminar, whatever, and then they showed us pictures about Vietnam. That's how we find out about Vietnam. About how to be against the war in Vietnam and stuff like that. Is there any way to, like get a small group of students that want to, that are interested in what you're doing, and then promote some things about issues in the community or something like that. Now, even the thing we did with the caucus, that could have been, it was done by the University of Memphis, but the students, but that could have been something that was on the campus too.
So got them plugged into
Right, and plug into.
Well, the last thing I want to say, I just came to mind because I wasn't really as active in things when this happened. Well, I was, but anyway, there has been. It doesn't feel like for instance, again, the Black Student Union talked about the problem of police brutality when Trayvon Martin died. They and other people, all these different groups got together to do a solidarity march on the campus. So it's not. I don't want to give the impression things are completely dead. That's not the case. It is more like there's that, and then it's okay. What kind of organization are we going to build, or what actions are we going to need to take this to take it a step further? Because we have to do more than well, we do the march, but then we have like a strategy in mind of how we're going to address these matters, and also, so yeah, not specific issues. So that's kind of how I see it.
So, and this is kind of touching base on your last question of what organizing outside of families, like what comes out of that, and bridging the gap with getting students involved. Because I've noticed in my experience with demos and rallies and marches, and doing it around campuses, is students. I've noticed there's a lot of students who like have the energy and want to get involved and stuff like that. And then when something like that happens, when they can come along and physically be part of it, they feel empowered. And then it's typical that you start to see these people over and over again at more and more events. And I don't know if that's particularly helpful to your situation, but just something that I've noticed from my
For
experiences.
sure.
So, bridging the gap.
Can give a little report on Cincinnati. Yeah.
Thank you.
Moved there about 7 years ago, right? A year after the so-called riots that were really just very large protests were, according to everything I've seen, almost 50% white, even though they were called race riots. They were just these large protests that lasted all night and were very angry about what had happened. And that was probably the last major even minor movement against police brutality in Cincinnati. Around the same time, there had been a local activist, black community organizer, who, according to neighbor accounts, was dragged out of his house and shot by police in his front yard and murdered. And since then,
When
there's
was
been,
that?
I do not remember his name. I only learned about this after moving to Cincinnati. I found it on the web. And I think there's definitely, like, people of color told me that they're scared to do anything in Cincinnati with the retaliation from the police, as well as both black and Latino told me the same thing. Um, the most recent incident was a black woman, homeless woman, was run over by a police officer in the park, and the media went out of its way to, like, make the cop look like it was a total accident, although according to reports he put it in reverse and ran over her again. He was like, "What was that?" Boom, boom. And then they went in the park and they tried to find homeless people to say that the cop was one of the nice ones and stuff like that. I got some notes here. Uh, so there's very little organization. There was a Books to Prisoners when we first moved there that folded shortly after the IWW moved their headquarters there. While we were there, they couldn't make it in Cincinnati and left, hightailed out of there. Um, and then Occupy came along, which at first, the first GAs that I went to had a pretty significant people of color showing up. And when I talked to people of color on the side, not at the GA where they felt very intimidated to speak, they would tell me that one of the main things they kept complaining about was that the white people didn't seem to have any kind of vision. Like, they came to find out what Occupy was about, what they wanted to accomplish, and they didn't, every time they tried to get that out of people, they got wishy-washy. If they tried to, like, I went up and proposed that we were in this very white neighborhood, Cincinnati is mostly black, that we move from this mostly white, affluent neighborhood where we were protesting over to a more poor, and there really isn't, there are white neighborhoods in Cincinnati, but there really isn't like an all black sort of neighborhood. It's very racially integrated for a city. It's probably, of all the places I've lived, I'd say it's the most racially, like, black and white people live next door to each other in most neighborhoods, except for the wealthy people who have their own little neighborhoods where they go live. And we've been trying to work with other people and for the past couple of years, and that hasn't worked out, so we're sort of moving towards that we need to start something on our own, not wait around for other people to join us or be willing to join us. We've also been working in Joliet, south of Chicago. Um, the Corrections Corporation of America is trying to put a prison facility to detain immigrants. And this is for the first time there is activism where I grew up, which is kind of interesting. I would say it's definitely, in my entire lifetime, there's never been like a single protest in Joliet. And now there's a growing coalition of Latino and people of color against this prison growing. Um, that interesting also led to some kind of antagonism with the IWW that's organizing in Joliet with some other unions. I've talked to Lorenzo a little bit about it, that there was they formed, uh, I can't remember the name of the coalition, but they formed a workers' coalition for Walmart warehouse workers in Joliet because the largest facility for reshipping all of Walmart's packaging goes through Joliet and out to the rest of the country through there. And the IWW has been part of that. They formed a community coalition, which then they got into a conflict. The community, when the Corrections Corporation of America thing came around, The community coalition was staunchly against it, while the building and trades union, who was providing the money, was staunchly in support of it because they said it's going to bring jobs to town. But luckily for the community coalition, because they'd already formed the coalition with the group beforehand, there was no way for them to break the pact that they'd made. So they had to come out against the prison. But there were definitely members of IWW who expressed that they thought that was a mistake. And I was very confused about that, actually, I would say. Well, I don't like to talk too much shit about the IWW or anything. I have a lot of friends. I've been a member. I support it. But there's definitely some problems with the leadership in Chicago. And they definitely seem to be moving towards they want to be recognized as a real union. And that seems to be leading them down a path of giving up in a lot, compromise.
Interesting. So, thank you.
Let me ask you this, in Cincinnati, do they still, have, projects where, black folks stay in Cincinnati?
With what?
Housing
Housing
project.
projects, do they
Yeah,
still?
there's still the Cincinnati Housing Authority. I'm in a Section 8 program, but they have two Section 8 programs.
Mhm.
One's with the buildings that are owned by Section 8 and ones that aren't. There's,
Okay, in the 1990s, because of Cincinnati, there was a lot of police killings in Cincinnati. Cincinnati at one point had some of the highest rates of killing of black folks by police during that, during that period of time. Let's say from, let's say 1990, between 1990 and 2000. So there were people who were organized, organizing
right.
around police brutality in Cincinnati.
Yeah, the police currently are on a work stoppage strike, which has some racial overtones as well, that mostly is geared, they will not come to black neighborhoods or poor neighborhoods for the most part. Like our house was broken into, we called the police, and they were like, well, is the guy holding a gun there? Is he still there? No. We'll just call it in, file a report.
Yeah, that sounds like Memphis.
But I guess for what it's worth, it leads to maybe a little less violence because they're just not there. And
Right.
so there's sort of this
Right.
movement too of like, well, why won't the police come and stop this violence in our neighborhoods? And there is a lot of gun violence going on, a lot of deaths as a result of that. But the police not really interested, the community is not really, the establishment is not really interested in dealing with it. And it was interesting for me coming from mostly white cities that to see like a mostly person black city, the black mayor that's totally out of touch with the population. And I thought at least there'd be some, it's just like a white city really,
Right.
as far as the establishment goes.
As except on here.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, they're basically, they don't want to be in power per se. They want to be in the position. So in order to stay in the position, then you cannot exercise any power.
I would say the
They go over there.
NAACP is
So
like the
I'm just
most
saying that,
outspoken
yeah,
group.
that in this, in various parts of the world where black folk have come in position, they do not uh, utilize or even acquire power. They're just sitting in the position, and and so the status quo can continue to exist.
Exactly. Anything else?
Yeah, that's what we do
Well,
have
Mrs.
here.
Wade.
Well, we want to thank everybody. We're sort of, we might be a little bit ahead of our schedule, but that's okay. We want to give people time to get some lunch.
I'm from Chicago.
Okay. And,
Well, you guys are welcome.
well, we're actually at 2:00. We can go on. Yeah, so give people time to get lunch. guess there's different places, we didn't have the resources to provide lunch for you. Elvis Presley Boulevard that a lot of you came in on. There's different places there. I don't know that there's, most of those are like the fast food chains. Um, and one place that actually has the David Rude stuff there.
Well, it's one restaurant in this area. It's called Four Way Grill. It's in the corner of Mississippi and Walker.
Walker, and this is Walker out here, the college is on Walker.
Yeah, Mississippi Boulevard. It's going back. Let's see.
So they
Coming back from Bellevue, going back to Walker is the next major street. You know, as you go out to Walker, you'll do I think a left, and right on the corner where the light is, and you look to your left, there's Four-Way Grill.
What kind of food you got?
Well, they used to have good, I don't, you know, 'cause I can't afford to go, but they used to have good food. I mean, everybody